Hi everyone, and Croeso, welcome back, and a happy second St. George's Day to you. It's usually on the 23rd, but it's been moved over because of Easter. So, first of
Yeah,
all,
we're not late.
sorry,
We're not late,
we're not technically late. So,
technically.
excellent. I mean, St. George, he's yeah, patron saint of England, not just England,
No,
Georgia as well. Um, he's
quite a lot of
really,
places.
yeah, um, and he's a venerated saint for having quite a remarkable story, um, which you can sort of see depicted in this Orthodox icon here that I've been gifted. Um, it-
Beautiful.
yeah, it's it's the slaying of this dragon here, which I
Mm,
guess it's relevant for so many reasons. It's like there's so many layers as to why that is significant.
mm. There is also a shaky historical
Mm,
um, story as well, isn't there, concerning the Crusades, um, which you can Wikipedia up easy.
yeah,
It's the generally accepted sort of historical version, isn't it?
is that to do with Richard the Lionheart um, placing himself and the army under his protection? Because that's what I'm aware of.
To be honest, it's been a while since I've
Yeah,
looked at that mainstream version of it. But
yeah.
he's a Libyan, is that right? Or from Libya, like a Greek.
Of what? Yeah, in when he was meant to have lived, as far as I know, in the fourth century, that part of Anatolia was
Hmm. Okay.
heavily Grecian. So
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
meant
cool.
to a Cappadocian Greek,
Hmm.
Roman soldier
Yeah,
who
yeah.
very has a lot of a bit of an eclectic background.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. The narrative of him slaying a dragon dates back to the sixth century. So,
Really? Is it that
yes,
old?
apparently, yeah.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
according to the Dictionary of Saints, the Oxford Dictionary of Saints. And but interestingly, we can trace back his involvement in England symbolically to Bede. So, eighth century, you can trace back an idea of St George in England, from Bede.
Hmm.
Um, and then when it comes to the Crusades, he's with Coeur de Lion, Richard Lionheart. He's venerated as this kind of brave saint. Um, and I guess the reason he's brave for two reasons, and one of them is because he slayed a dragon supposedly that was terrorizing an innocent a village of innocents.
Yeah,
So symbolically, it's got that kind of dragon of chaos and kind of Christian order, to
yeah.
essentially wipe out the evil. But
I think
he
it's worth mentioning just from what we looked at your icon as well, um, uh, relationship to St. Michael.
exactly, yes,
He seems to George fulfills many of the roles that Michael does as well, in terms of a beast slayer and a leader of a general and things like
mm,
that. Um, and in fact, that icon is almost identical to remember images that Hinges Martin was showing us of Michael. So, and of course, then going back into further into Roman religion. And we were looking at who is it? What's he called? Slaying the Beast. The Roman religion. You went to the temple in London.
oh, Mithras,
Mithras. Yeah, you
yeah,
get images of Mithras, which is
yes,
doing he's doing similar things.
yeah.
Um,
You
uh,
can it goes back to Marduk and Tiamat in the Mesopotamian origin story as well. So it's a archetype. It is really
is an
a
archetype. Yeah.
good example of an archetype that recurs all the way throughout culture. Um, right. So a quick look.
Who are we going to look at next?
So, in what's worth mentioning here is the fact that actually before George, England had another patron saint, which was Edmund,
Yes, yeah.
right? And Edmund was patron saint, it seems, up until the Battle of Agincourt. Um, and then this is for me is where it gets interesting because in the way that Agincourt, Battle of Agincourt is remembered, there's kind of like these subtle Welsh undertones, right, in being involved, and that's to do with Shakespeare. Um,
Longbows.
exactly,
I
right. The longbow.
was just going to say quickly before you go on about Agincourt is that for those who don't know, Edmund he was a Saxon prince, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And his story is that he was killed by pagans,
Mm.
and they tied him to a tree and shot arrows at him. Um, so he's kind of more fitting for a patron saint of early England than George is as a historical character.
That's a good point.
He's of the people there, and
Mm.
he died for his faith whilst
Mm.
practicing his faith. It kind of fits as so. It's interesting that he was replaced in that manner.
Exactly. Yeah, indeed. Um, yeah, and so famously in Henry V, the play, he cries out, proclaiming his Welshness.
Right,
Like King Henry V, he's born there. He's born there. I think I'm not sure about how far back, and if in terms of his background, how it goes
right,
back to
okay,
Wales. He was saved also by four Welshmen who jumped in front of him being killed, right, and
yeah,
saved his life. So I don't, this is how it's recorded, and then he chooses a saint which has a old British through line back to the traditional history. Okay, and this is through King Gweirydd, um, which I'm going to read from Alan Wilson, The Trojan War, just a little bit about the British George. Okay, this idea of a British George, which underlays this kind of this pan-European George that becomes patron saint of England, right? It has to be remembered that British history was preserved in southeast Wales, and that the arrival of Joseph of Arimathea, known as St. Illyd, in AD 37 is well traceable. This leads to the sites where he set up places of worship, and most importantly, to the foundation on lands given to him by the British king named as King Gweirydd, who ruled the Midlands of present-day England. This powerful British king was known to the Romans as Avaragus. That might mean after the virago, as in Boudica. And Roman poets mocked Nero in his fear of Avaragus King Gweirydd. One wrote how Caesar might be fortunate if Avaragus slipped from his chariot pole and broke his neck. It does not take a genius to recognize Gweirydd as George, and it was to this George, Gweirydd, that St. Illyd, Joseph of Arimathea, gave the white flag with the red cross upon it that is still flag of England to this day. So the story is that Joseph has this shield of white, silver background with a red cross. You could say that that's the white background is Albion, and the red cross is the blood of Christ upon the land, which ties into the whole Jerusalem myth, mysticism and everything like that. Or did he come here? Um, the idea that somehow Joseph gave this quintessentially English flag to a foreign reprobate out in Edessa around AD 400 is absurd. This is just another illustration of the desire to obliterate all ancient British history. George of Edessa is another gigantic red herring, deliberately designed to draw attention away from the accurate and provable British history. The idea of Gweirydd giving land to Joseph of Arimathea around AD 37, and that being a first major British Christian settlement a mere 560 years before the Bishop of Rome sent Augustine to the immigrant Anglo and Saxons in AD 597. This is a huge embarrassment to certain parties. King Gweirydd was a British king descended from the Brutus migration into Britain around 504 BC, as he was a king descended from the tribes of Israel who migrated from regions north of Haran and Syria around 687 BC, and who crossed all the way through Asia Minor and arrived at the Dardanelles around 650 BC. Right, so this is all stuff to do with
Brutus, yeah.
migrations. Um,
Is that
yeah,
that's a good. I think
pretty
that
much.
covers
Yeah, we're all good. Yeah,
what we were gonna.
yeah,
So, um, what was I thinking of? Um, Gwynedd is mentioned in is it in Geoffrey? Is there the two brothers?
yes.
Um,
There's Gwiridius and Averagus.
and Archaeologists, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
both.
and then of course you read the quote about the him slipping from his chariot pole, so that's in a juvenile poem. It's really interesting. It also demonstrates, the historical fact about how the British nobles used to fight on their chariots and would jump in between and do all these crazy tricks and stuff, which is
Yeah,
um, really interesting because that's just what you see Mediterranean cultures doing for hundreds of years before that. Um, Especially considering the chariot finds that they've had up in
and
the
well,
north of England
yeah,
recently as well.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's very cool. Um, so Arviragus is definitely a historical king.
Yeah,
Um, Now, is it, am I right in saying he's called Gwynedd in some of the Welsh translations
that's it. Yeah, that's right.
of Geoffrey? And some people argue that Gwynedd and George are not like Gwynedd is not the Welsh version of George, but there's plenty of examples, isn't there, throughout this tradition where people are given technically the incorrect name, but
Yeah.
it's just become part of tradition as the way it is. Like Maxon is a version of the name Maxentius, not Magnus or Maximus. He should be called Maxim technically, but
Mm, mm, mm.
we know him as Maxon, so mistakes happen
Yeah,
essentially.
precise. So
Yeah.
the Welsh name, the Welsh version of George directly is Shaw or Shaw is. Or I'm sorry if I've
Mm.
butchered that, anyone, but
Mangled.
yeah, probably. But
You did better than I will.
yeah, it, when you go looking for, because this put forward this idea put forward by Alan Wilson in this book. If you want to go and find anybody else saying that, you can find it. It's not, there is a tradition linking George and
Yes,
Gwynedd,
yeah, yes.
and it's in the Dictionary of Welsh Saints um, from 87. So it is an idea which is not original to Alan Wilson at all.
Mm.
It's but
Have you got that little snippet from Harding's Chronicle?
I certainly do. Yeah.
So I was looking at that, and I must admit, like the end bit actually reads differently to what I thought it did, and but it's interesting considering what we've talked about concerning Michael as well.
Yeah. Um, right. So this is Cambrian Triumphants, the facsimile from Guyan Books, um, which you can get like I guess a really good collection of a lot of this history. Um, in It was written for Charles II, so that shows how things changed after the Stuarts
Hmm.
basically got knocked off. So
Surprisingly.
yeah, right. So okay, the so this extract is from Harding, who, when around the time of Agincourt and when St George was being instantiated as the patron saint of England, he was delving through the manuscripts and he was trying to basically find a route through to the old George, which that's as much as we know. But this is the extract. Joseph converted this King Averages by preaching to know the Lord divine, and baptized him, as written hath Nennius, the chronicler in Britain, tongue full fine, and to Christ's law made him incline, and gave him then a shield of silver white, a cross end long overthwart full perfect.
Hmm. Is there a little end bit to that about is that the end of that quote in that one?
I think it's a different, yeah, the different versions on
Yeah.
there, so I can get the other one.
That's right. I think I can find it as well quickly.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because he's um making a connection directly to Averages.
yes.
And the allusion to Nennius is interesting as well, isn't it?
This is the interesting thing. When you consult Nennius Historia Brittonum to go and look for it, you won't find it in the modern translation.
Hmm.
So it's a clue to maybe how many versions of this Nennius manuscript have there been, and what have we lost, basically. Um,
Hmm.
so I have the other version here if you want me to read it out, because
Oh,
it's some extra. Have you got
go
it?
on then, go on then.
Okay, right. So Joseph converted this king Averages by his preaching to know ye laws divine, and baptized him, as right hath Nennius the chronicler in Britain tongue full fine, and to Christian laws made him incline, and gave him then a shield of silver white, and cross and long, and overthwart full perfect. These arms were used throughout all Britain for a common sign, each man to know his nation, and thus his arms by Joseph creation, full long afore St. George was generate, were worshipped here of Michael elder date.
Yeah. So this is full long afore St. George was generate. So is he trying to say that um Averages was using the white and red cross
Yeah, I think so.
before the St. George of Edessa was generate? Is that what he's saying?
That's what he's saying, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
And
says
then
so.
and
Yeah.
before that, and also that the saint worshipped was Michael.
Yeah, Michael was in Archangel Michael.
Archangel Michael, which makes sense for like if we're thinking about Glastonbury as well, because the tower at Glastonbury obviously is dedicated to St. Michael. But then obviously if they're putting on all these, giving George sorry, giving Michael a George persona as
Mm.
well, it's curious that it's all those themes are running through that.
So this is it. There's the employment of George as a symbol in Britain links him in with this Holy Grail narrative and everything else to do with
Hmm.
um, a kind of kind of loosely British Jerusalem ideas.
Yeah,
There's more to it than meets the eye immediately.
yeah.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously in The Holy Kingdom by Adrian Gilbert with Wilson and Blackett,
Yeah,
he also talks about Wroxeter um, as an ancient capital of
yeah.
Britain, and that this was the city founded by Arviragus and Claudius. And he makes a good, strong link between the name, which will be something like Wirrak or something like that, which is at the heart of Wirraconium for
Hmm.
Wroxeter, and possibly the Wrekin hill fort, which is next to it, which is very cool.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it makes sense. I think it's a name like Wirrak or like Werok. You get later in the 6th century, you get Gwerok, who's the Count of Bro Werrock in Brittany. And his name is probably at the root of like Eric, as in Eric and Enid. And I think that's essentially what you've got in Averagus is Wirrak or something like that. And Adrian, see, I agree with Adrian. I can definitely see Gweirydd coming from a name like that. You get names like in Lou, the Irish form is spelled Lugh.
Yes.
But in Welsh or in Welsh and then onwards into Latin, that can turn into a name like Loth. So
Yeah.
the GH can definitely turn into a TH sound. So I don't see why Gwiri, obviously you'd lose the G at the beginning and then you basically got Wirrick or Werrick, which is what
Wow.
the name we're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, I think that possibly Claudius also got Gloucestershire named after him. So then Geoffrey was actually talking about Gloucestershire, but
Yeah.
I think they were both. I think we actually mentioned this in the Gloucestershire video. Yeah, I think Averagus got his city founded for him. But then also, it's worth looking at the Wrexham and the toponymy of Wrexham because that goes right up the Severn Valley. And this is Wilson and Blackett's argument for where Glasstenic might be,
Yeah.
is because Averagus's territory seems to be further up into the Midlands, into um, uh, up the Severn Valley, basically, rather than down into Somerset and where Glastonbury is today. So, but then I wouldn't be surprised if, I mean, he seems to, in Geoffrey, he becomes king of the entire west of Britain, with
Yeah.
Claudius having everything east, and he
Mm.
seems to be in charge of Cambria, like, um,
Yeah.
so maybe, he could be two Glastonburys for all I know.
Could well be. Yeah, indeed.
Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I think it's absolutely fascinating that you do have a very much a historical king who we can go through the Welsh records and go through Latin records and find
Yeah.
he's in the right time and place for when Joseph of Arimathea may possibly be in Britain.
Yeah. And indeed. And what I find also interesting is how sometimes they're tied in with somebody who we could propose as being Christ in the Welsh genealogies as well, because of Cymbelin or Cunobelinus.
Hmm.
Um, and those who saw the video I did last time with the genealogies and how they could be symbolically the Ballymauer Cunobelinus kind of family tree is kind of symbolic of this Apollo symbology and how
Hmm.
both of those sons are Gwiridius and Averagus are sons of Cunobelinus. It's
Yeah.
like it ties it back in with the Holy Grail.
Yeah, it's
Frankly.
fascinating. It's interesting that it comes right back.
Right.
They could have been anyone's sons.
Exactly.
Averagus could have been anyone's sons, but no, he's it seems to be Cunobelinus' son, and
Cunobelinus.
he's the one who gets gives the grant of land. So, I mean, yeah, that is interesting.
Certainly is. Um, Now, those who've read Marshall's book, Marchell Abrahams, The Great Migrations, will know that she's given a bit of attention to St George's Cross in
Oh
there.
yeah, a lot of
Um,
attention. She does a hell of a lot of work. It's fantastic.
yeah, yeah. Um, Where can I read from?
Oh, I think it's also worth saying there's no reason that any of the other patron saints, the other St. George's, are not St. George of Edessa.
St George, right? Okay,
Because there are lots of saints which have the same name
yeah,
from all over the Christian world from the first to the third century. There's really, I mean, in Britain, St. Augustine is a very different St. Augustine to on the
yeah,
continent.
right, yeah,
Okay, so,
okay,
you know, the fact that there's a conflation between two St. George's is perfectly possible.
mm, yeah,
So Henry Henry V, he may have exactly who he was talking about, and he was calling him George, and it was King Abrajas. And then other people are going, "Oh yeah, of course, St. George of Edessa."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, there's absolutely no reason that that can't happen. And in fact, modern academics would be very weary about finding references to people in very far-flung places and assuming it's the same person that's being spoken about,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
especially ones with their own Christian tradition that goes really far back and is
Mm.
rich. I mean, we got literally, especially one with thousands of saints
Yeah.
mentioned in various places. Like, why would you assume it's the same one? But
Right.
unless that someone has, you know,
Mm.
written things in order to cover it up for one reason or another. It's a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, exactly.
But yeah, there's lots of different ways in which these people or ideas or and the symbols that go with them have like coalesced and intermingled, and some of it could just be plain mistake, and some of it could be, a direct obfuscation of the history. Who knows?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that's a good point. Um, right. So this is
But
reading from Marchell. It is said that this cross has medieval origins. The British records say that St. Illyd gave Gweirydd, Welsh for George, son of Conflation, this cross to aid him in the fight against the Romans. But this was either an anachronistic memory or a deliberate reminder. Waddell's assertion that the Sun Cross is as old as the Earth itself is the original. And I don't think anyone would argue with Waddell about that, really, to be honest. That's a really
yeah,
old sign, this one here,
yeah,
that ends up being what we kind of know now colloquially as the Celtic cross.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's carved into what like um well, sorry. Like carved in caves and things that are tens
mm,
of thousands of years old. You get that symbol. It's
yeah,
it's it's old. Yeah.
yeah. Um, Waddell's Goths are not dark and sinister. They are tall, brave, ruddy-haired men of integrity, sons of the sun, solar knights of the Red Cross, the original cross of St. George. This is antique beyond belief. Not only have artifacts including Anatolian-style Red Cross bowls been found at Troy, which dates from somewhere between 2300 BC and 1750 BC, but there is uh, 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 uh,
Lost.
yeah, uh, a pre-heliocentric symbol for the world, now used as a planetary symbol for the Earth. This is a circle crossed by a horizontal and vertical line representing the world, divided by four rivers into the four quarters of the world. Okay, so she carries on to talk about how it appears in the city of London,
Hmm.
and I'll just carry on. Um, we have seen how supremely ancient the Red Cross is, being the glyph of the earth herself. We have seen its associations with Troy in Anatolia, and now we find it again in New Troy on the left bank of the Thames. These arms are anciently recorded at the College of Arms, which records predates the founding of the college in 1484 by Richard III by 100 years. The two dragons are relatively ancient in original supporters. The original supporters were two lions, which is another reference to the Sumerian. They seem to have been associated with St. Paul, but it is likely that He, with his associations with London, has been confused with the contemporaneous St. Illid, who is the Gilead or Joseph of Arimathea. Joseph of Arimathea, the Gilead, is said to have given a white banner with a red cross to Gweirydd or George in the middle of the first century BC. And
Yeah.
Marshall goes
So,
on to say how Gilead
oh,
is.
go on.
Just to finish off that
Yeah, yeah, go on. Sorry, yeah, go on.
the that Gilead is the foundation for Galahad in the Arthurian romances, which is that would be interesting to have a look at too some point.
I think it's one of the better examples. Galahad is one of the few where there isn't like a clear um like a respective character in Welsh tradition.
Right. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
for instance, Gawain, we have Gwalchmai, Percival has Peredur, Kay has Kay. Uh, but Galahad doesn't have a really obvious one, and there's a few different um, blah, 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 blah. There's a few different interpretations of what it could be, but I think the Gilead one is
Mm,
the stronger one, I think, because he is very much related to Grail lore in particular.
good. Yeah.
Um,
Great.
uh, I thought that was interesting as well, considering what we've been looking at in terms of Kairos and Tauros, that the equal armed cross, and then it was later contained within a circle, is
Mm,
what was chosen over a Cairo symbol at some point. Um, so that's pretty cool as well.
certainly
Um,
is.
um,
We've
and
had
yeah,
some.
the
We've had some really.
City of London, they know stuff.
Oh yeah. Oh well. That's right. Yeah. It's kind of you kind of get. It's just packed full of metaphysical language. The whole thing. You go around and you look at it and kind of see the kind of people they venerate in there. For example, the statue of Edward the First, and you think, okay,
Mm.
this is what these people are about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah. Uh,
I think people should get Marshall's book, and because
mm,
there's loads more about George
yeah.
and the name George. She does amazing work on that. Um, so people should definitely get that and read that because it's really good. Um, I think that this is a really interesting question, and I think that we should be like careful about where we put our eggs in our basket on this one because I think other than Averages, the other option is there is some sort of much more important um, archetype that could also be responsible for the British for the English St. George, shall we say? That there's something a story that's being told in this part of the world, and that George needed to be
Yeah.
reborn in England as the patron saint, as the Dragon Slayer,
Yeah.
because maybe we'd stopped paying attention to Michael, and
Mm,
we should be paying attention to Michael.
mm,
But so he's been then reborn as George, because there is some sort of, as I say, something that people feel like needs to be understood that those symbols should be out there for one reason or another.
yeah.
It's also worth noting that in certain localities in England, you get the George and the Dragon story, but instead of George, it's the local lord.
Ah.
It's,
Okay.
it's
That's,
like it's
yeah.
just the local who you can actually go and see his tomb in the local church and that sort of thing. And this is often just very easily swept away as, oh, it's a story about rooting out paganism.
Mm,
But
yeah.
I think it's probably older forms of Christianity that's being rooted out, if anything.
I'm glad you said that
Yeah.
because I mean this is controversial waters, but I think um, I'm reminded of Elizabeth the First and her letter. where
Mm.
she talks about how the Catholic Church entered Britain therein by blood, basically, and the massacre at Bangor and that can be, I think, would be worth holding in um, mind when discussing what George means as an archetype today, basically, because I think we have to think about this in archetypal language because it's actually so much broader than you're given. You
Yeah.
know, what do you think?
Yeah. No, no, I think that's interesting
Yeah,
because, um, especially because a modern St. George will link you to a certain nationality and
yeah,
a certain geography.
yeah,
Um, whereas a British St. George literally bridges that gap in a way,
right,
especially where he is geographically,
right.
you know, and I think that's interesting to bear in mind. I think it could be a reason why you'd want to be nudged one way or another
Mm,
by people with political and religious motivations. Um, on both sides of the coin. But
indeed, indeed.
yeah, but
Very
we
good.
currently
Yeah,
live under the auspices of one side of the, one side of the coin. So they're
yeah.
the people we should be looking at and watching, basically.
Interesting.
Hmm.
It's very interesting. This George has it come to life in a new way for me in many ways.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was great fun.
That was good fun, Pete. Cheers.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed it, everyone.
We should do another one. So we'll be back soon because what we'll do this week, Adam, is we'll record some stuff on some news stories.
Yeah, there's been a few, haven't there?
Yes, there is. Did you see the latest DNA with Iberia?
I did see that. Yeah.
Yes, I think that was something that you might want to
Yeah.
throw your oar into.
All right. No worries. I'll have a
Should we
look.
do a little? We'll do a quick one at some point, and
Yeah.
we'll do 10 minutes on on a couple of stories. Some
Yeah.
interesting
Cool.
archaeology as well in Wales at the minute, so we should and even have a look at the Hoard as well.
Yeah, we have to have a look at all of these things. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, it's good.
Okay.
We'll do it nice. What's the word I'm looking for? Up to date. We're
Yeah,
always
yeah.
back in the past. Let's look at some news.
Yeah, yeah. There we go. We get our head out of dusty old chronicles and look at modern science. There we go.
Great.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.